But let's talk about this, man. One of our favorite head coaches, John Harbaugh. He's unemployed, looking for a job, and it seems as though he can have any job he wants, right? Of the available vacancies, and he might even get a couple coaches fired if he says he wants to come there. I want to ask you this question: what is the best job for John Harbaugh to take?
I've thought a lot about this, and I think it's really just two jobs that I've narrowed it down to, and it's the Atlanta job and it's the New York Giants job. Those are the two jobs that I think make the most sense for him, and they are kind of for two different reasons, right? One, the Atlanta job is the roster, is the most ready-made, talented roster that's available as of right now when you look across the opening of jobs, with the exception of obviously the Baltimore job that he already left and got fired from. I think you look at Atlanta and you go, okay, any roster that's got that much talent, and you like that they brought in Matt Ryan, and there's an opportunity for him to have a lot of say. I think that's one of the things that he's going to be looking for. Is he's been heavily involved in the draft process with the Ravens organization for a very long time, and I would assume he's going to want to have some say, and I think Atlanta would be a really nice fit. The other option for me is the New York Giants, and that's because you kind of like the young core that they have offensively. You're playing in New York. You have an opportunity to turn that franchise around. You get out of the AFC. You go to the NFC, so you don't have to worry about playing your brother anymore, and I know they don't like playing each other. And I think at the end of the day, you talk about this a lot, and it's the truth. New York shines brighter. To win there is to win in a place where you can cement your legacy. And this is a guy who has already won a Super Bowl. He already has a legacy. He doesn't have anything to prove. But to win in New York, as much as winning in Baltimore is great, winning in New York is a totally different ballgame. And I think that's got to tempt him into potentially taking that job in New York.
Yeah, listen, this is about dreaming, right? You want to dream big.
Of
You got a
course.
Super Bowl in hand, right? And people are saying that okay, you're probably a Hall of Fame. If you want to move the stone or move the line, right, to where it's like without a doubt, I'm a Hall of Fame and I'm one of the best coaches to ever coach in the NFL, right? That's what you committed your life to, right? Is coaching in the NFL and being one of the best to ever do it. You take the New York job, and I so badly want to say the Atlanta job is a better job. The only thing is the quarterback situation, right? I feel like both franchises they have question marks at quarterback, right? And so with that being said, I'm going to give the nod to the New York Giants because of that. But I like the Atlanta job, and there's something very important that you said when you talked about the front office. I didn't think about that. And if I'm Matt Ryan, right, the president of football operations, I'm trying to bring John Harbaugh because I want some of his personnel office, right? I want some of
100%.
his personnel people to come along because if we can get to the point to where we're drafting like the Baltimore Ravens, then now we're in the playoffs every single year and we're playing football and doing football the right way. So I probably write a blank check to John Harbaugh from the Atlanta Falcons, but if I'm John Harbaugh, I probably choose the Giants before I choose the Falcons.
I think this for him is going to come down to a couple of things. We talked through the rosters and the quarterbacks, which is definitely going to factor in. But I really, based off of the reporting and just the knowledge I have in talking to people around the league, it's that Harbaugh's going to want to not have to be responsible to answer to Joe Sheen, right? And that's to be responsible to, hey, my job title is I'm the head coach, but I only answer to Arthur Blank, or I only answer to the Mara family and not Joe Sheen. And I think that's where Atlanta, I think, offers that opportunity because they just had a clean sweep. They don't have a general manager. And the Mara family in New York has been traditionally almost too loyal to some people. Looking at you, Joe Sheen, I have no idea how this man has continued to keep his job. But if I'm John Harbaugh, I'm not answering to Joe Sheen. What has Joe
No,
Sheen
it's not a
proven?
shot in hell.
There's no chance. And if that's going to be a sticking point, I don't think he takes that Giants job because, quite frankly, it would be disrespectful for him to have to answer to Joe Sheen. So the Mara family is going to have to make a tough choice because they've let Joe kind of lead this conversation. But if I'm them, I can't imagine that they would even think through that. But again, they are an old school family. They like to be loyal to their people, and they have said that Joe is leading the search. Will that mean that he has to answer to him? I think that could be a big deciding factor for Harbaugh.
Yeah, and I think from a pride and ego standpoint, it would be interesting to see if Joe wants to go big game hunting or he wants to feel like he's the man in the building,
Agreed.
right? Because you bring in John in there, you're talking about a bigger personality, the guy that actually has a resume that includes winning at a high level consistently in Super Bowls. So it'll be interesting to see that dynamic. Paige Dimakos, let's have some fun, right? We have three teams. We have the Atlanta Falcons, the New York Giants, and the Baltimore Ravens. And what we're going to do, well, what I'm going to put you on the hot seat to do is to fill in the blanks, right? Are the best head coaching candidates for each job? And I'm going to ask questions because I'm interested to see your thought process as owner slash GM Paige Dimakos.
Okay. All right. You want me to start with Baltimore? You want me to start with the Baltimore Ravens?
No, let's start with the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay. You want me to start off with who I'd hire number one overall?
Yeah, who you hired number one overall?
Okay, so this is hard because I would really like to slot John Harbaugh in here, but I have him going to a different job. And this one might surprise you because you were probably going to think I didn't want him to get another head coaching job. But I do. And I think this fit makes a lot of sense when you think about all the offensive weapons that they have and a young quarterback on a rookie deal that they need to get the best out of. And that is, I think there's a good chance for Mike McDaniel to get an opportunity in Atlanta. When you look at that team and you look at the amount of offensive weapons that they have on that roster and the creativity offensively that Mike McDaniel can bring to the table in tandem with Atlanta being the right market, I think for Mike McDaniel to handle, similar to Miami in the South, it's not a traditional powerhouse. It's not a super tough market for football. I think this could be a very good opportunity because I believe that at the end of the day, Harbaugh, they will miss out on the Harbaugh sweepstakes. And I think this could be a very good option for them if he doesn't do what we told him to do, which is go to Pittsburgh and become the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, and I didn't think at all. You're right. I was not expecting you to pick Mike McDaniel for any head coaching opportunity from here into the foreseeable future. To be honest, but I like the situation. I like incorporating the offensive skill set, and they lack the offensive identity, right? And when you look at what he was able to do with Tua Tagovailoa, meaning taking him from being a quote unquote bust, right? Like he was 1 year about to be out of the NFL and had nothing to do with concussions. They had to do with on the field play to making him a Pro Bowl quarterback and earning him a $200 million contract. So I like that if you're talking about trying to identify the quarterback position and then utilizing these offensive weapons.
The other part of this, too, is most NFL organizations, when you've been committed to one side of the football from your head coach, you usually follow that up going in a different direction, right? And so Raheem Morris was a defensive guy. I anticipate now they potentially go in a different direction. They bring in Mike McDaniel. You look at, if you're an offensive play caller and you see all those weapons they have on offense in tandem with now all the young rookies that Terry Fontenot drafted this last year and how good that defense was in taking a step forward. And also that division. That division is really all up for grabs. And I'll go back to it being the right market. And also, Matt Ryan and Mike McDaniel have history together. He was a quarterback's coach, I believe, back on the Atlanta Falcons when Matt Ryan was there. They overlapped sometimes. So there is connectivity. I anticipate that would be obviously play into him getting the head coaching job.
Yeah, I'll say this: if Mike McDaniel lands in Atlanta, he has a head coaching resume that I would dream for,
Oh,
right? To
yeah.
be able to be the head coach in Miami and then go leave Miami, go straight to hot Atlanta. That's how I want to live, right? I'm trying to go from head coach of Miami Dolphins to the Atlanta Falcons, right?
That's for sure.
Let's
There's
do this.
definitely no shortage of fun on those jobs. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yep. Let's do this. Let's go with the New York Giants.
This one we talked about a little bit already with the Harbaugh situation, but I believe that John Harbaugh is the best fit for this organization. And it's because there's quite a few reasons, but the main reason is this team has yet to find a coach in the post-Caldwell era. It has been a long time since they have been able to have a steady head coach for a storied, one of the oldest franchise and most successful franchise. It's been a minute since Eli Manning was there. It's been a minute since this team. And Tom Coughlin, right? Tom Coughlin. And they haven't been able to find their guy since Coughlin was there. And it's been a long time since Coughlin was there. They've gone through a lot of, you think about Joe Judge. I mean, there's so many random head coaches that they have gone through there in New York. And it's time for them to bring in somebody who already has an established legacy of winning. Not a guy who, hey, he's an offensive play caller or he may. No. You guys are the New York Giants. Act like it. John Harbaugh is the right guy to come in, and what you're going to have to do is Joe Sheen cannot be in charge of John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh has to answer to one person and one person alone, and that is Mr. Mara. And that is exactly what you need to do to steward this long-time franchise into what has been historically a very, very good franchise, but is flirting with now being a bad franchise and mirroring more of what the New York Jets have looked like, and that is the opposite of what you want to do. So I think John Harbaugh has to be the fit there because he's the right guy to come in and be able to totally change the culture for that franchise and bring them back to a semblance of reality that they used to have.
Yeah, if you believe that history repeats itself, right? And for certain franchises it has proven right. Like when you talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? When they won in the 70s and when they won in the early 2000s, it was the same thing. It was a wild quarterback, right? Ben Roethlisberger compared to Terry Bradshaw, a bunch of offensive weapons and a really good defense, right? When you look at the 49ers, right? They've won kind of in the same manner when they won their Super Bowls. And if you look at the New York Giants, you hit on this point, and I'm going to take it back to another coach too, right? They won with Tom Coughlin, who was the probably biggest personality or biggest name, right, in that Giants building, even with Eli Manning being there. And if you rewind 20 years before that, it was Bill Parcells, right? Bill Parcells being the head coach, and he kind of manned the locker room, the media attention. And so I think that the New York Giants are a franchise where they need to hand it back over to a head coach who has the biggest personality or is the biggest draw in the room.
It's
So
just
let's wrap this up.
it's a market where you have to be very tough and to be able to handle New York, and you have to be able to block out the noise. And that is way easier said than done, right? But Harbaugh is established enough, has won enough, is a proven winner that he can come into New York and have a certain cachet off the jump that the New York Giants have not had in a very long time. And quite frankly, since Coughlin was there. And I like that you brought it back to Parcells. This is an organization that is used to having a big shoulders, big guy type of personality. And that's exactly what you can get from John Harbaugh. This needs to be his team and absolutely not Joe Sheen's team.
I agree with that. Well, let's wrap up with the Baltimore Ravens. What head coach fit do you have for the Baltimore Ravens?
I would love to see the Baltimore Ravens hire, and I'm going to go head coach and play caller. I would love to see them hire Brian Flores as the head coach, and I would love to see them bring in Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. I think that would be a 1-2 punch that would be very good for all the things that they are trying to accomplish. One, you cannot afford to drop off culturally from what has been established with John Harbaugh. And I understand that fans wanted to move off of Harbaugh, but one of the things that you cannot have happen is the standard of winning and the standard of excellence and discipline and all the things that Harbaugh stood for cannot fall off. And for that reason, I believe Brian Flores, who is a tough coach, who is a smart coach, who's a guy who, quite frankly, really, really deserves another shot at being a head coach for a good franchise with good ownership. I think that would be a perfect fit for him culturally. And behind that, you hire a guy like Cliff Kingsbury to do all the play calling. You saw what he was able to do with Jaden Daniels in Washington. I think it'd be a great fit for Lamar, and it would totally revitalize that offense. So that's the direction I'd like to see them go with head coach and coordinator.
This was the head coaching fit during this drill that I had the biggest question mark about. But I'll say this, I'll give you credit. I think you knocked it out the park. I like the Brian Flores hiring. If you can get an offensive coordinator, right, like somebody that truly specializes, that's been doing this a while. Not my first time being an offensive coordinator. I just got promoted from being quarterback coach. No, I've been a head coach. I've been an offensive coordinator. I know the X's and O's on the offensive side of the football, and I can scheme and dial things up. I think that gives them the best chance to pick up where they left off, because we know this. Head coaches, they bring a certain culture, right? They can bring a certain temperament. And I think that Brian Flores, his biggest knock was the development offensively, right? Like, what does he want to be offensively? But if you hand that to a guy that's a proven OC slash head coach, offensive savant, I think you knock it out the park. So I
And
like
and
that, Paige Dimakos.
and
And
we
I'll say
know
this a bit.
and we know that the big thing this offseason, right, is you're going to have to do what's right for Lamar, right? And but I caution people because it's very
I,
yeah.
can I cut you off?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to cut you off because I want to ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I know people have been critical of Cliff Kingsbury. Do you think he can do right by Lamar?
I do, because I believe he can be a great offensive coordinator, because we've seen that. That is where he thrives.
Okay.
He cannot be responsible for head coaching duties. And this is something that this is exactly why I said the tandem of Brian Flores with Cliff Kingsbury. Because even if that story that came out about Lamar is, let's call it 10% true, right? Just a little bit true. You cannot afford for those bad habits and tendencies to seep into your locker room. And that's the thing that we know John Harbaugh was not allowing. And I know Brian Flores is not allowing either. These are tough, hard-nosed, old-school football coaches that preach discipline. And if you bring that in as your head coach and what sets the standard in tandem with a guy who, Cliff is a great play caller, he just isn't a great head coach, because he's not the guy I want being in charge of all the details around what it takes to run an entire organization. So that's why I'd like to see those two together. And the proof is in the pudding. You saw what Jaden Daniels did with Cliff Kingsbury. They were great together. This year, there were injuries to Jaden, and I think Washington's going to really regret moving off of Cliff Kingsbury.